Hello, people from around the universe! I am your host, the Italian Ace Trainer, and welcome to a bit of a different video, as today we're going to be discussing the beautiful game, and more specifically, one of the most divisive players at the moment. Cue the intro. Yes, today we're talking about the one and only Paulo Dybala, and whether or not Juventus, which is my club, as you may or may not be able to tell from what I'm wearing, should keep or sell him. Now, before we begin the video, I want to make it perfectly clear that I'm not biased in any way, and just give me a second to check my set. Yep, that's looking good. Oh no. Okay, so maybe I had a little bit of a bias, and maybe he's my favorite player at the moment, and maybe I want to see him retire at Juve, but before you click off, I am going to be trying to go about this in as objective of a way as possible. And what I mean by that is that we are mainly going to be talking about stats, we're going to be comparing him to other players in Juve, and we're just going to see what his contribution is to the team overall, to then make a decision of whether he really should move on or stay at the club for at least the next 3 or 4 years. Let's take this one step at a time, as there's a lot of different factors to go over. So I think the best place to start is just how injury prone is Dybala. Well, to determine this, I think we should look at the 2021-22 season. And the reason I'm saying this one in particular and not all of the ones preceding it is because last year was a bit of an anomaly, with the long COVID case he had in 2020 still dragging on with its effects in terms of him never really getting back to full fitness, something which was exacerbated by the aggravated injury he got by being rushed back to game time when he wasn't ready. And so I don't really think that's a normal season to consider. And the ones before really show no signs of particular injury proneness, if that's even a word. So I don't think bringing those up is very helpful either. So, looking at this year specifically, we can see that he's been called up for and played in 17 out of the 23 games Juventus has played thus far. Now, that stat alone can already give you some information, but I think it's important to put it into context. For example, how much time has he actually played? And Transfermarkt has him at right around 1,200 minutes clocked as of today. But even this number is a bit random without further parameters, and so I think a good way to put this in perspective is to compare him to another player in Juventus, and one that is much less divisive, and that is Federico Chiesa. So I want to start this off by saying I absolutely love Chiesa. I hope he stays with us forever, much like Dybala, but he, as far as I know, has not been called injury prone by anyone in the fan base. So it seems like it would be a good baseline to base our assessment of Dybala off of, especially since they're both arguably our two best players, at least going forward. Looking at Chiesa's stats this year, we can see that he's been called up for and played in 16 out of the 23 games that Juventus has played so far. That means that Dybala has actually played one more game than Chiesa has. But again, let's actually bring this into context and see how much time Chiesa has spent on the pitch. And it turns out it's right around 1,100 minutes, which is basically just one full game less than Dybala, which is stunningly close to the number that you would expect just by getting the number of games played overall. But, I hear you saying, this is not really fair to Chiesa, as he's only had the one major injury as opposed to Dybala's quote-unquote repeated offenses. And I agree to an extent. However, I think some people forget that Chiesa actually missed a couple match days at the beginning of the season because of either one nagging injury or two minor ones back-to-back. And yet, as far as I can tell, no one is concerned about Chiesa's injury record. And I've been to a lot of different Juventus-related websites, whether that be blogs, the official Juventus site, their official Facebook page, their official YouTube page. So I've seen a lot of different people comment, and no one has really seemed concerned about Chiesa's injuries. But okay, maybe Chiesa has just had a very unlucky start of the season, and he's actually a lot less injury prone than Dybala, and so comparing the two is, in this way at least, is like picking your data points to fit your narrative and ignoring everything else. And yes, if you look at last year, the data would certainly support that, but that could also be a case of recency bias, as if you go back to the year before then and any season prior, Dybala, again, didn't really show any signs of being injury prone. I mean, don't get me wrong, he would get injured usually once a year for, 2 weeks and then maybe another time for a week. But it wasn't anything concerning. That's kind of par for the course when you play so many games in one calendar year. So what does this all mean to me? Well, I think this indicates that Dybala, honestly, is not as injury prone as some may think. Don't get me wrong, he is getting injured more often than he was prior to the aggravated injury in 2020, but it's not like he's become a Aaron Ramsey or something like that, which, by the way, those comparisons are ridiculous. I see them made all the time. Ramsey has played one game for us this year. One. Like, are we really comparing a player with 17 games and one with one and saying, I think they had the same injury record right here. I mean, might as well sell both. Come on. You're making a fool of yourself. You're making a fool of anyone reading the comments, which would be me. And honestly, you're making a fool of Juventus. So please stop. Having said that, I can see the argument for people saying that Dybala is still too injury prone for at least the contract that he's asking for, which would be 10 million per year with bonuses. So I actually think it wouldn't be just straight up 10 million. It would be, I think, 8 or something million that could get to 10 million if certain conditions are met. And while yes, that is a lot of money, and I know that most of us would love to be paid a tenth of that every year, it's not really unreasonable when you consider the fact that it would bring him tied to De Ligt as the highest earner in the club. And at least at this point in their careers, I have no problem saying that Dybala is the better player, and therefore has every right to ask for more money from a club that he's been in for a lot longer than De Ligt. But alright, that could just be my bias showing through. Maybe I just overrate Dybala a lot and he's actually not been that good this year, even when he wasn't injured, and so we really shouldn't be renewing him for this kind of money, if at all. So, let's take a look at his actual stats. Well, Dybala is not only our top goal scorer by far, with only Morata even having over half of the goals that he does, but he's also our top assist maker together with Bernardeschi. So clearly, he's not doing that bad, especially since he's apparently injured every other day, which, yes, is a nice little jab at the people that pretend that he's injured as often as someone like Ramsey or Eden Hazard. But maybe you're still not convinced. Maybe you think that saving those 10 million a year on Dybala will somehow solve all of Juve's financial problems, and now we can afford to bring in Haaland and Lewandowski and Mbappe and everyone that we want. Well, I hate to break it to you, but even if you sell Dybala for a nice amount of money, which with this market still being a little bit depressed from COVID, would probably not exceed 60 million, and that would be after he renewed the contract, we still would not be able to afford anyone who would be even half as good as Dybala is. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, but most top forwards, which is the category of player that Dybala falls under, no matter how much you may dislike him, are usually upwards of 70 million. So even in a like-for-like swap, we would not be getting a better player. We would probably be getting a player that at the very most is just as good and would still take time to acclimate to Juventus and potentially Serie A as a whole. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page with what I mean here being that Dybala, with where we are in his contract and the fact that he's 28 would not get us as much money as we would need to get an equivalent replacement who is either A, younger, or B, has more years left on his contract. So in a moment where our finances are on the brink of disaster, our sporting results are almost complete garbage, and they actually would be if you took out all of Dybala's goal scoring contributions, why would you sell your best player for not even his full market value? Look, you can not like the guy. You can pretend that he's made of glass. You can think that he's the worst player to have come to Juve in the past 10 years. But the truth of it is that just looking at the stats and at what he contributes to the team, he is by far, and I mean this literally, our most important player at the moment. And we cannot afford to lose him when we're already so precariously close to collapsing. So please, next time that you think that Dybala is too injury prone to ever play for a club like Juve, or that he's not contributed anything particularly good to the club, or that he should just be sold even for zero profit, just take a moment and think that without him, we probably don't even make the Europa League this year. Yeah, let that sink in. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and there's a very good chance that it won't do well, and so it will just be one of these things that I do once every 2 months or something like that. And that's fine. I mean, I still like making Pokemon content a lot, so this wouldn't really bother me. But if for whatever reason you want to see more football or soccer for you American fans related content, then I guess leave a like down below and maybe comment, do more of this, or give me some ideas for what you want to see in the future. Regardless, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you all in the next video. And until then, remember to follow the way of the ace. See ya!